Друзья, сейчас президент идет, мы с вами начинаем. Я буду, чтобы упорядочить, предлагать вам задавать вопросы. Итак, поем, встречайте президента.
Уважаемые друзья, дамы и господа, добрый день. Я в вашем распоряжении. Думаю, что нет необходимости вступительные слова какие-то долгие произносить. Тема примерно, наверное, всем известна. Стратегическая стабильность, кибербезопасность, региональные конфликты, торговые отношения. Да, еще говорили о сотрудничестве в Арктике. Ну вот примерный набор. Пожалуйста, прошу ваши вопросы.
Давайте РИА Новости начинаем. Вперед.
Спасибо. Добрый вечер. Может быть, вы расскажете, какие темы вы обсуждали наиболее подробно? Вот, в частности, очень интересует украинская тематика. В каком контексте она затрагивалась? Обсуждалась ли ситуация на Донбассе? Обсуждалась ли возможность вступления Украины в НАТО? И еще перед переговорами большие ожидания были связаны с возвращением послов двух стран в столице. Вот, в частности, ваш помощник Юрий Викторович Ушаков говорил, что это возможно. Приняты ли такие решения и как в целом прошли переговоры? Спасибо.
Да, что касается возвращения послов, места своей работы в Москву, соответственно, американского посла, в Вашингтон российского, мы договорились о том, что этот вопрос решен. Они возвращаются на место к месту своей службы постоянной. Ну, когда конкретно, там, завтра, послезавтра, это вопрос чисто технического характера. Договорились также о том, что Министерство иностранных дел Российской Федерации и Госдеп США начнут консультации по всему комплексу взаимодействия на дипломатическом треке. Там есть о чем говорить, завалов накопилось очень много. Ну, как мне показалось, обе стороны, в том числе американская, настроены на то, чтобы искать решение. Что касается Украины, то да, эта тема затрагивалась. Не могу сказать, что уж очень подробно, но, насколько я понял президента Байдена, он согласен с тем, что в основе урегулирования на юго-востоке Украины должны лежать Минские соглашения. По поводу вступления возможного Украины в НАТО, эта тема затрагивалась Москвом, здесь, пожалуй, нечего обсуждать. Вот.
You said that one of the topics was strategic stability. Could you please elaborate on the decisions on this matter? And will Russia and the United States resume or launch negotiations on strategic stability and disarmament, and namely on the New START treaty? Do you plan to start negotiations on the further extension, review of modalities, or maybe a signing of a new treaty in this area? Thank you. The US and Russia hold special responsibility for strategic stability in the world, judging by the fact that we are largest nuclear powers in terms of the number of warheads, re-entry vehicles, and delivery means, as well as the quality and the scale of modernity of these weapons. We realized this responsibility, and President Biden took a responsible and timely decision to extend the New START treaty by another 5 years till 2024. Indeed, a question arises, what's next? We agreed that we will launch consultations at the interagency level under the auspices of the US State Department and the Russian Foreign Ministry. Colleagues at the working level will decide on the makeup of these delegations and the venue for negotiations as well as the schedule of these meetings. Let's give the floor to foreign journalists. CNN, major chance. As for the overall assessment, I believe there's been no hostility. On the contrary, our meeting took place in a constructive spirit. Indeed, we have varied assessments on a number of issues, but both sides expressed their intention to understand each other and to seek common ground. Talks were quite constructive. As for cybersecurity, we agreed that we would begin consultations in this respect. I believe it is extremely important. As for responsibilities and who should take them, let me brief you on matters that are common knowledge, but probably not everybody is aware of that. US sources, I don't want to make a mistake here as to the name of this organization, but the US sources claim that the majority of cyber attacks are made from the US territory. Then a second one is Canada, then 2 Latin American states, and then the UK. As for Russia, it is not listed in this ranking of countries that see the significant number of cyber attacks from their territory. That's one thing. Secondly, throughout 2020, we have received 10 requests regarding cyber attacks, on the US infrastructure. As our colleagues put it, these cyber attacks were launched from the Russian territory. And we received 2 such requests this year. And on all these requests, our colleagues received exhaustive answers. On its turn, Russia sent last year 45 such requests to the relevant agencies of the United States. And this year, we sent 35 requests. And no response has been provided so far. That says that we have a lot to work on. And as for the scale of responsibilities and who should take them, it should be decided within negotiations. We agreed that we would start such consultations, and we believe that the cyber security area is extremely important in the world at large, for the United States in particular, as well as for the Russian Federation to the same extent. For instance, we know about cyber attacks against a pipeline organization in the United States, and we know that this company had to pay a ransom of $5 million USD. According to my information, they were returned some part of this money from electronic wallets, but some part of this money is still missing. But what do Russian authorities have to do this? We face the similar threats when it comes to one of the key Russian regions and its healthcare system. And we see where these cyber attacks are launched from. We see that these attacks are coordinated from the United States territory. I don't think that the United States authorities are interested in such kind of manipulations. We need to get rid of all kinds of insinuations and innuendo, and we should launch the expert work for the benefit of the United States and the Russian Federation. We have reached an agreement in principle on that, and Russia is ready to do that. Artie, please give the mic to Artie. Yeah, I believe some part of the question was not answered. Well, to be honest, this part of the question was not interpreted, or maybe you decided to ask a second part of your question. But with regards to commitments to Ukraine, we have one single commitment to help and facilitate the implementation of the Minsk agreements. If the Ukrainian side is ready to do that, we are ready to follow this path without any doubts. Let me draw your attention to one thing. In November 2020, the Ukrainian delegation presented its ideas on how it intends to implement the Minsk agreements. And it's not a confidential document. It stipulates that, first of all, proposals on the political integration of Donbas to the Ukrainian legal system should be presented, as well as to the constitution. To this end, constitution should be amended. It is stipulated there. That's the first thing. And secondly, borders between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, the Donbas line, this security situation should be ensured the next day after the election. That's Article 9. So what did Ukraine propose? As a first step, it proposed to return the Ukrainian armed forces to their permanent stationing areas. That means that Ukrainian armed forces should be deployed in Donbas. That's the first thing. And secondly, they proposed to close Ukrainian-Russian border in this area. And third, to hold elections 3 months after these two steps. One doesn't need to be a lawyer, and one doesn't need to have a special experience to understand that it hasn't nothing to do with the Minsk agreements. It contradicts fully to the Minsk agreements. So what kind of additional obligations should Russia take here? I believe that the answer is pretty understandable. As for the exercises, we're holding these exercises in our territory, just like the United States does with regard to many drills. But we do not hold our exercises by deploying the military equipment close to the US border. Unfortunately, that's what the American partners are doing with regard to our border. So we need to have these concerns, not them. But this is the subject of discussion and of clarifying positions. With regard to our non-systemic opposition, and a citizen that you have mentioned, first, this person knew full well that he violates the law that exists in Russia, and he had to understand that he is a person that is a repeated offender. He deliberately violated this law. He went abroad to receive medical treatment, and once he went out of hospital and posted his videos online, a requirement appeared, but he ignored the requirement of the law, and he knew full well that he is wanted. Nevertheless, he came back to Russia, and he deliberately wanted to be arrested. So he did what he wanted to do. What can we say here? With regard to persons like himself and the systemic opposition at large. Unfortunately, the format of the press conference does not allow us to have a detailed conversation of that. But let me say the following. I believe that it's pretty simple and it would be clear to everyone. And if you could just have an unbiased coverage of this, I would appreciate it. So the United States declared Russia as its enemy and adversary, and the Congress made it back in 2017. The US legislation have provisions that the United States should support the order and rule of democratic order in our country and support democratic organizations. And it is all contained in your legislation. So let us ask a question. If Russia is an enemy, then what kind of organizations would be supported by the United States and Russia? I believe these are not organizations that make Russia stronger, but those who deter Russia. And that is the goal of the United States that they made public. So these are organizations and people that help implement the US policy on the Russian track. So what should be our take on this? I believe that clearly we should be cautious about it, but we would be guided and we would react within the Russian law.
Okay, please give Pavel Zarubin the mic, and then we go back to RT. Pavel Zarubin, I wanted to follow up on this subject. I mean, look at it. Americans are continuously keeping up with this rhetoric of political prisoners in Russia. They peddle this theme. Have you even brought up the Navalny topic during the talks? And if you did, in what tonality? And the second question. We are seeing a new stage of Russia-American relations. It started with a rather harsh statement of his in your his description of you. President Biden has indeed touched on the subject of human rights and the subject of people who think they are fully in tune with the subjects, with this topic in Russia. We've discussed this. We've discussed harsh statements as well. We've heard them. He called me right afterwards. He explained himself, and I was fully all right with what he said. He offered to meet. I mean, this was his initiative. We've met, and once again, the conversation was quite constructive, and I once again understood that President Biden is an experienced statesman. Our one-on-one conversation took almost 2 hours. It's not every world leader that gets this amount of attention. I mean, his predecessor was asked the same question. He evaded this. This president decided to respond to the question directly. And in this, he is very different from President Trump. But look at it this way. Anything that happens in our countries is something that political leadership is responsible for, and the presidents included. Who stands accused of what? Who's the killer? But look at it this way. Look at the American streets. People are getting killed there, including those who are leading the various political organizations. You can get a bullet in the back of your neck. A woman just ran away from the police and they shot her in the back. But take Afghanistan. One single strike can kill to the tune of 120 people. All right, assuming this was a mistake, it happens on a war. But shooting from a drone at an unarmed crowd, clearly the civilian crowd, what is this about? How would you call that? And who's responsible for this? And how would you call this person who is the killer now? Or going back to the human rights record. The Guantanamo prison is still operating. It doesn't even start to resemble what is stipulated in the international law or in the US legislation, and yet it exists. Secret CIA prisons across the globe, including those in the European countries, where people were tortured. Well, is this the great human rights record? Oh, I doubt that. Would anyone here would agree that this is how you protect the human rights? But these are facts on the ground. And this is the reality of the politics today. And we understand that this is how it's been done. And on the basis of that, we respond. So when people get funding from abroad to stand for the hidden agenda of those who are paying them, who pays the piper. RT now, please. RT, a question about the Arctic. You've mentioned the discussion on this track, and the United States have been accusing Russia of militarizing the Arctic. And so do the United States allies. In March, State Secretary Blinken voiced his concern. So what have you discussed in detail? Well, we've discussed this in an extended format with our aides present, and this is an interesting field. I mean, the exploration of the Arctic and in general and of Northern Sea route in particular is of huge interest for many countries, not just us in the United States. So yes, the United States have concerns, but they are completely baseless. I mean, these concerns about the militarization are baseless. We are not doing anything new. We are simply restoring the infrastructure that has already been there. All right, we are retooling this, we are retrofitting this, the borderline infrastructure, the military infrastructure, but also the environment conservation and emergency command and search and rescue infrastructure. We are creating the capacity to save people at sea, if that, God forbid, happens, or we are trying to protect the environment. I've told our colleagues that I see no grounds for concern whatsoever. Quite the opposite. I think there's plenty of ground for cooperation, and we should cooperate in this. After all, Russia and the United States are one of the 8 members of the Arctic Council. And by the way, Russia chairs the Arctic Council this year. Moreover, as you probably know, there's a strait between Alaska and Chukotka. On one side you have the United States, another Russia. All this taken together should actually prompt us to work together, to redouble the effort. And the use of Northern Sea route, its use is regulated by the international law. There are 2 major regulations. It's the law of the sea of the United Nations, that dates back to 1982, if I'm not mistaken, and the Polar Code, which is comprised of several documents, which was ratified in 2017. So that's the legal framework. So I drew the attention of our counterparts to this and to the fact that we, Russia, fully stand ready to stand by these international regulations. We have never infringed upon any of them. We stand ready to lend a helping hand to all the countries and companies who wish to explore the possibilities of Northern Sea route. Now the navigation is open for half a year, but in fact it's more than that. And as the planet warms, this navigation will be open for a longer time. New icebreakers, including the Leader icebreaker, are put online, and we have the mightiest icebreaker fleet in the world. So this proves the much demand for the use of Northern Sea route. Now, the law of the sea of the United Nations describes and sets the legal framework in and around of of the international waters, territorial waters of the country, adjacent seas, exclusive economic zone, and the freedom of the sea, the internal seas. What is that? These are the seas that lie within the sovereign territory of the country. Then the territorial sea, 12 miles. Adjacent sea, 12 more miles. In terms of adjacent seas on the country in question should give the right of passage, the free and peaceful right of passage, even to the military ships. Well, do we object? No, we don't. Now, the internal seas is something different. We're not obliged to provide anyone anything. But bear in mind this. The territory of the internal seas, I think it's, well, 5 of them. The Obsk territory, Pskov, the Bay, and some others. The length of this is to the tune of 1,000 nautical miles. Well, this is a sovereign right that we enjoy, whether we want to give the right of passage. But we're not abusing this right. Last year alone, we had 1,000 requests to cross them. And I think we've only rejected 10 requests, and the majority of them is the ships that fly the Russian flag. And the regulating agencies deem them unfit to comply with the Polar Code. And the Polar Code itself, Polar Code proper, defines and spells out the requirements for the ships that are crossing these seas. So take us all together, the stakeholder states, members of the Nordic Council. We can do much good together. There are plenty of things for concerns and for contradictions, but I think that there's no issue that cannot be solved if we engage in an earnest effort. NTD, Rada Zeynalova, please. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good, or at least not bad, relations between Russia and the United States have always been the guarantor, the guarantee of the stability in the world. Well, you've just said Biden agreed with you. Now you're talking about the mutual respect and relative calm and warmth was something that can characterize this this meeting. You've probably talked about red lines, but Americans have red lines as well. Did you manage at this meeting to agree on how not to cross the red lines, and by doing so to improve or at least not deteriorate the relations? Let me put it this way. We understand what what our American partners are talking about, and they understand what we are talking about when we say this is a red line. But I'll give it to you point blank. We haven't went so far as to define the specifics. But we have agreed to work together to continue and follow through on cybersecurity, on strategic stability, and I think that it is during these consultations and in our common effort in the Arctic, we'll be able to spell out the specific details. ABC News, please. Our American partners. Well, let me just reiterate what I've just said on the so-called, quote-unquote, foreign agents and people who portray themselves as the non-systemic opposition. I think I've responded to your CNN colleagues, but I think these are the rules of the game, so I have to repeat it when I repeat it to your question. Okay, fine by me, I can do it. The United States has a law that spells out that the United States will support specific entities and organizations in Russia. At the same time, the Russian Federation was labeled as an adversary. They went on the record and said publicly that they will stymie the development of Russia. It begs the question, what kind of organizations the United States and the West will be supporting and pay them if we are an adversary? It's quite clear that, like the United States back in the 30s, we've labeled them as foreign agents, but we haven't banned them. I mean, they can operate, all right. If you're labeled as a foreign agent, that does not preclude you from operating in the country. Well, if it's an extremist organization, that's a whole new story, whole different story. The organization is in question publicly has called for riots and public disorder. It has openly instructed people on how to make Molotov cocktails, so to use them against the law enforcement. It called for the participation of underage person in riots. America has just recently went through well, grievous chain of events after a certain African-American individual was killed, and an entire movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, appeared. I'm not going to go into details. I will spare you them. But we've seen pogroms. We've seen, you know, looting and violations and riots. We sympathize with the Americans, but we do not want for the same thing to happen on the Russian soil, and we'll do anything possible to prevent this. And it's not about me fearing anything. If you want to think that, can you please give the mic? All right, about my opponents being jailed or imprisoned. People went into US Congress with political demands. 400 people are now facing criminal charges. They are facing prison terms of up to 20, maybe 25 years. They are called homegrown terrorists. They are being accused of many other things. 70 people were arrested right there on the spot. 30 of them are still arrested. On what grounds? Not quite clear. I mean, none of the official authorities from the states are informing us about it, so we don't know that. One of the participants, a woman, was shot dead on the spot. She was not threatening with, with arms or anything. Why am I bringing this up? Many people are facing the same things as we do, and I am stressing this. We are sympathizing with the United States, but we do not want the same thing repeating here. Now, a couple of more questions, please.
Good day. Dmitry Laru, Izvestia newspaper. Did you manage to agree with the U.S. side on the return of certain Russian citizens that are jailed in U.S. prisons? And if it is the case, when could it happen? Indeed, we brought this up, and President Biden brought this up with regard to U.S. citizens that are currently in Russian prisons, and we discussed this. There could be some ground for compromise. Russian Foreign Ministry and the U.S. State Department will work in this direction. Russia TV channel, the recapping question. Good day, Mikhail Antonov, Russia 1 TV channel. You said that you discussed trade with President Biden. Maybe that's one of the positive points. Business communities seek cooperation from both sides. What are the prospects for cooperation? Well, that doesn't depend on us, but rather on the U.S. side. We do not impose any restrictions. I believe that after imposing certain restrictions in economy, the U.S. lost as much as Russia. Indeed, it somehow affected our development to a certain extent. And to a certain extent, the US implemented their goal of deterring Russia and in its development, but there's nothing quite important here. Second thing, the important and the interest of the US business community. The US had the biggest delegation at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, 200 persons. As for restrictions against the US companies, some US companies lost in Russia, and they gave this business to their rivals. What for? It's pointless, but they still have losses. Our trade with the US amounted to some 28 billion USD, but in the first quarter of this year, it grew by 16%. I believe that if this trend persists, it will benefit everybody. And we talked about this. You know what? I'll have a couple of questions from this side and a couple of questions on the other side. Yeah, a lady. Please give the floor to the lady. She will rock my world here. A couple of years ago, you met President Biden when he was vice president, and he said that he looked into your eyes and he didn't see a soul there, and you said, well, that means that we understand each other. Could you please say, did you look into his eyes and what did you see here? Did you see a person that you can work with? And please tell me, has President Biden invited you to the White House? And if that is the case, did you agree to go there? Well, President Biden did not invite me, and I haven't made the relevant invitation myself. I believe that for such meetings and for such visits to happen, there should be conditions that should be ripe. As for looking to the eyes and seeing a soul or not seeing anything, it's not the first time that I hear that. To be honest, I don't remember such conversation, but I assume that it could have happened. If you ask me what kind of a person and interlocutor President Biden is, I can say that he is a constructive person, well-balanced and experienced, seasoned politician, and I expected that. He recalled his family. And conversations he had with his mother. Well, these things don't have directly something to do with our business, but nevertheless, it shows his qualities and his moral values. It is all appealing, and I believe that we spoke the same language. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to look into the eyes and see the soul and to pledge eternal love. We defend the national interests of our countries, and this relationship are always based on pragmatism. Andrei, please, you have the floor. Andrei Kolesnikov, Kommersant newspaper. Mr. President, following this meeting, did you have any illusions, any new illusions? Well, I didn't have any old illusions, let alone new ones. There have been no illusions whatsoever. Let's move to this side. At the back of the hall, please give the mic, and the lady will decide for herself. Good day, Pavel Rybnev, Zvezda TV channel. Mr. President, I have two questions, if I may, regarding global climate change. Have you discussed this with President Biden? And the second question regarding American media outlets. Recently, you gave a big interview to the NBC channel. Is it fair that you give an interview to American media outlets, whereas American presidents do not give any interviews to our media outlets? And do you see a positive impact of this interview if your words are always distorted and if you are treated not in a very respectable way? Well, with regard to distortions and some misinterpretations, well, that is the practice of international relations here, and there is nothing to do about it here. I got accustomed to this. We've been living with it for decades. As for the interviews and who gives these interviews, that's up to the leaders to decide. If he wants to send a message to the people, we try to do that, and that's exactly the essence of my interviews to the American media outlets. As for the activities of our media outlets, for instance, President Biden raised the issue on the work and on the work of Radio Freedom Europe that we declared as foreign agents. Well, I got an impression that members of the US delegation were not aware that before that, well, we actually have two media outlets that are broadcasting for foreign audience, that's RT and Sputnik. And before that, the US declared them as foreign agents, and they deprived them of their accreditation. So what we did was retaliation, and at the same time, Russia today abides by all requirements of the US regulator. It is registered in this way, although they face some problems with regards to hiring of personnel and financial transactions, but they don't have such problems. But the US media outlets do not abide by the Russian law. We spread the word on our opinion, and we hope that we'll be able to work at the level of foreign ministries in this matter. Well, I actually wanted a lady to ask a question. Thanks a lot. Galina Polonskaya, could you please speak up? Galina Polonskaya, Euronews. We all knew how you shook hands with Joe Biden at the very beginning. Have you managed to reach a new level of mutual understanding and confidence? Do you believe it is realistic at this stage to reach a new level of relationship that would be totally clear, transparent? That is the ultimate goal of two countries. Lev Tolstoy once said, there's no happiness in life, there's just a glimpse of happiness, and do cherish it. I believe that here there can be no confidence and ultimate confidence, but I see that we've seen some glimpse of this confidence. Yes, please. You have a mic, but you want the second one. Oh, this one is not plugged in. Ivan Blagoy, first channel. COVID-19 is one of the key subjects here. Have you brought it up during your meeting with the US president? And if that is the case, what are the prospects of joint work with the US colleagues to overcome the pandemic? Maybe we could talk about mutual recognition of vaccines. Well, we brought this up, but just briefly. In passing, you know that in the times of the previous US administration, we accommodated the US request and we sent our equipment as part of humanitarian assistance. Well, it's not that they run off of money, it's just that at that point in time, they were in dire need of ventilators. We have done it selflessly, and we are ready to such kind of cooperation, but we haven't discussed this in detail. After the meeting with President Trump, relationship has deteriorated between our two countries. Are there any factors that would tell that this will not be the case today? have a relationship reached rock bottom? Well, I can say all the actions related to the deterioration of Russia-US relations were initiated by the US, not Russia. Congressmen are quite inventive, and I do not know what they will invent further on. Yes, please.
Alexander Gamov, Komsomolskaya Pravda. Did you know that our team has won the Finnish team 1-0? Well, congratulations. If we take the same assessment, the same scale to the Putin-Biden meeting, what's the score? Who won? Okay, in the second part of the question, before coming to Geneva, Americans were saying, we're going to exert pressure on Putin. Have you felt this pressure, and how have you stood up to it? I think the entire Russia is now thinking how our president is doing up there. I think it's plenty. Yeah, I think so too, more than enough. No pressure at all. It was a frank and candid conversation without, without going on a tangent from the set agenda. Like I said, neither us nor United States have tried to exert any pressure. But this was not the point of the meeting. And the score? Okay, the score. Well, I think before we met President Biden that this is not a competition event, and I fully dovetail with him. Are we going to really set the score? This was a productive meeting. It was fruitful. It was to the point. And it took place in an atmosphere that was actually enabling to create, to accomplish something. And the most important thing is the glimpses of confidence and hope that we had. BBC News, please. Mr. President, Joe Biden calls for a stable and predictable relationship with Russia. However, the West believes that unpredictability is an inherent trait of the Russian policy. Are you ready to forego instability in order to improve the relationship with the West? Well, quite a compilator. It was difficult to follow the logic. I'm really envious. I mean, it's like a contradiction of terms. You said the West believes, and then the second part. Are you ready to forego this? Well, if the West believes this, it doesn't mean that this is the objective truth. So let me address your question in parts to dissect it. You said that the West believes that Russian policy is unpredictable. Well, let me reciprocate. The U.S. withdrawal from the ABM treaty in 2002 was unpredictable. Why would they do that and disrupt and undermine the basis of the strategic stability? Then the INF treaty withdrawal in 2019. Is that what you call stability? The Open Skies Agreement withdrawal, is that what you call stability? There's almost no legs to stand upon. Well, thankfully, the START treaty was saved, and I'm grateful that President Biden has made a wise decision to extend the New START treaty for 5 years. Now, take the situation in and around Ukraine, the Crimea. This was where it all started, right? Okay, let me plant a question. What was stable about supporting a coup d'etat, an uprising in Ukraine? I mean, the President Yanukovych was ready to announce new elections. He agreed with all the demands. No, it wouldn't work. You'd have to go with the coup, the ramifications that followed, the Crimea, the east of Ukraine. And you're saying that we are seeking the instability? Well, I don't think so. In my mind, we see it differently. We don't think in these terms. We think that we are trying to to create stability, but for the situation to be stable, we need an agreed set rules of conduct across all areas: the strategic stability, the cybersecurity, the regional conflicts. I think that we can agree on these things, and I have an impression that we can agree. Let us draw this to wrap it up. I'm sorry, can't hear. Speak to the mic, please. To the mic, please. What? Blue fog, the popular tunes? Let's do something, you know, speak something intelligible and reasonable. Bloomberg, please. And we'll wrap it up then. Final question to the lady. Bloomberg News, Ilya Arkhivov. In 2016, after you met Trump, a new set of American sanctions was quickly imposed. What about this round of negotiations? Have you got any assurances that there will be no new sanctions in the near term coming from the United States? And then you said about the glimpses of hope. Do you have any ideas on how feasible it is to expect that President Biden would be able to deliver, to follow through on the promises? I mean, it's believed that the American political apparatus is actually showing more solidarity with President Biden than it showed during President Trump's presidency. So, all right, you've agreed on consultations on cybersecurity, on Ukraine. Do you think there will be any working groups established? Do you think any red lines will be respected? Can you describe something? I think I've spoke about the red lines at length. You see, the understanding and confidence in this is created. It stems from negotiations. There's no reason to meet each other and threaten and to exchange, you know, trade verbal attacks. That's not the point. The restrictions, the sanctions, is something I've brought up already. We don't know what's brewing in the American political apparatus. I mean, we know the broad strokes, the currents, but we don't know the details. There are probably opponents and proponents of developing better relations with Russia. Who will prevail? It's difficult to say. Hopefully, steps will be taken after this summit. Well, hopefully, one might think so. But it would only mean a missed opportunity if it happens. And the final question to a journalist from Canada. Раз, два, три, четыре. Есть перевод? Русский перевод. Русский перевод. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Please repeat the Well, it's a great thing that your 9-year-old is actually interested in these things. And the answer is pretty simple. You've got to look around and just see Think to yourself, it's a wonderful world. I mean, the grown-ups, these adults, leaders of two major countries, two major nuclear countries, are meeting to try to make this world a safer place, a secure place, a prospering place to live for many people from across the globe. They will discuss the stuff about the horrible weapons that can kill us all, that has to be somehow prevented from. They will discuss nature, how to make rivers clean, how to make seas clean, how to stop floods and droughts, how to make sure everybody has plenty of food to eat for anyone in the globe. What else will they discuss? They will discuss health and medicine, so that when kids grow up, they will be healthy. They can study and have a bright future, and I wish very much. So this meeting will be covered with these ideas in mind. Thank you.